Hello and welcome to Painting with Deadartstudios. I'm Robert of Deadartstudios, and the painting we're working on today is an oil on canvas, and it's one that I started just using thinners and oil paint mixed together to create a very runny paint that I dripped onto the background, and then I put a little bit of purple on the front and created a sort of river and reeds scene. And I'm continuing on the background of the paint today to try and get some more colour and intensity into it. And I've started here with orange. I'm just dripping it on, and the mixture is just plenty of thinners and a little bit of cadmium orange paint here. And just putting it in places where I think it'll look nice, and then I sort of lift the canvas to make it run and drip around. And like most of my paintings, this one kind of came out of nowhere. I just wanted to play around with thinners and paint to start with to see what kind of effects I could create. Obviously, Rothko is the most famous artist that used this kind of technique, and I want to try to create a painting like Rothko, because obviously everybody says about abstract expressionism that they could do it, anyone can do it. It's actually really difficult to do, so if you fancy trying to recreate a Rothko, have a go and see if you can, because I couldn't. So yeah, I'm just dripping the paint here, making it run by lifting the canvas up and around. And I suppose the general idea behind this painting, now it's started to take shape, is some kind of magical, mystical, I don't know, cave-like scene in the background, blending together with a sort of river scene with some reeds in sort of purple and violet in the foreground, and there's a sort of little river down at the bottom. I quite like that, and that came out quite nicely when I did it. So I think I'm going to keep that, and it's created this issue where I need to kind of blend the two aspects of it together, the thicker, more impasto paint and the thin paint that I'm dripping on now. I need to make it sort of work cohesively, and in some ways that's a bit difficult, because when you look at the thin paint you see a lot of the canvas, and it kind of removes from the feeling of a scene a bit, and it becomes definitely more of an abstract piece in terms of executing technique and trying to evoke emotion and feeling that way, rather than by creating a recognizable scene and evoking emotion feeling that way. And to bring the two together is quite difficult, I think, because they don't really necessarily match, but I'm going to keep going with it. The big looming stalactite-like features on the top left there, the big blue ones, they're getting a bit difficult to deal with. I kind of feel like they interfere a little bit, but then also they're a feature as well, so I have to see what we do with that as we go forward, but it's a bit of a mystery to me. Also, I'm not keen on the phrase going forward. I think it got overused and it's easy to say without actually thinking about what you want to say, so I'm going to try and avoid it. So I'm just flicking paint on now and using different techniques, just throwing it around. We've got some yellow on there, and obviously the cadmium orange, and we're just splattering it around and trying to create sort of deeper colour. And if a part of the painting feels a little bit too deep or dark, then I can use the titanium white mixed with thinners to sort of block that out, and then we can go over it again. And that's also a way to layer it, I think, because that is going to create a sort of block between the canvas and the paint with the high opacity of the titanium white. It won't look the same as if you've just gone straight onto the canvas with some of the colours like the cadmium orange. So I'm dripping it down there, and obviously it's a little bit out of frame, but just got to get the paint to drip where I want, and I'm just watching it as it slowly trickles down and making sure it doesn't really go into the reeds, at the bottom, and then I'm just using my brush there to add a little bit more shape, and maybe that bit was a bit too intense, so I'm trying to thin it out a bit. It's been a while since I've done this session on this painting, and it's interesting to rewatch it and see what I did and remind myself as I discuss what's happening. So now I'm just literally throwing the last bits of the orange on and the yellow to get the intensity that I'm hoping for creating in the background. Obviously, I suppose it's inspired as some kind of sunset, evening, golden hour like scene in the back there, and then this sort of dark twilight violet at the front when things are in shadow. I mean, when you look at photography and you try and photograph in a sunset or a sunrise, you'll end up with a very dark foreground if you expose correctly for the background, and if you expose correctly for the foreground, you get very light and bleached out background. So I suppose we're going for the former rather than the latter there. But obviously with the painting you have the option to balance it out, which can be like HDR, I suppose, in photography, and you can show your details in the foreground and you can show your details and colours in the background, but you still have the option of creating that photography-like effect, which I think is kind of what's coming out for me here. And I'm putting some reds on now. And I started off my creative and artistic journey in adulthood, at least, with photography when digital photography became accessible for everybody, and it took away the time-consuming nature of developing film and stuff, which I did do a little bit as I was a kid, but the expense of it, I suppose, was what limited me as a child to not be able to pursue photography. And then when I had the opportunity as an adult and it became so much easier to do, and that's when I picked it up again, started to learn about composition and how to create something interesting in that frame, which in itself is an abstraction, isn't it, of the world around you. Take an abstracted piece and frame it, and I'm just dripping the paint again here. I think I've created a really intense red and orange bit now, and I'm just trying to move it around. I don't want a fried egg round sun, but I do want intensity, so I'm trying to create it by blending out a little bit where I need to, but trying to get that deep colour in there as well. Anyway, I hope if you are watching that you're having a calm and collected evening and you manage to enjoy yourself in this what can be a stressful time of year, at least here in the United Kingdom, as we're heading into Christmas and everything seems to be happening all at once, but in combination with terrible weather and high levels of illness throughout the country. Everybody's feeling a little bit under the weather, I think, and also everyone's so busy. And so I hope that you just manage to find a little bit of time to take a breath and sit down or lie down and just be calm. I know it's not possible all the time for everybody, myself included, but it's nice to have the intention to try and carry that out. And I've got some red paint here now at the bottom that I'm trying to flick up to create some kind of streaking effect, and move it around again. At this point the canvas is really quite soaked with thinners, and it all really does start to just melt into one thing. And it was interesting when it dried, actually. It kind of dried in a sort of fractalized pattern. It kind of almost as if it cracked, but you can't really crack because it's so thinned out, but like this fractal pattern arrived, and it's actually quite interesting. So I'm kind of interested to use that in the art as we go forward, but it doesn't really look like it does as we're doing the piece now. And that's often quite interesting, how when you do something and then it dries, it can look quite different. Even just using acrylic paint, which dries really quick, still the next day when you come round, I don't know if it's because you're feeling fresh and the world looks a little bit different, but your paintings often look very different to the night when you do them. Well, I say the night, for me it's the night. I'm usually always painting at night because that's the only time I have. Now I'm doing some little whitish yellow streaks across here, and I really like those, but then they kind of sort of blended away and faded into the background. But for future reference, those sort of meteor sprite-like streaks across the sky would definitely be something interesting to do on a canvas, and it could be quite quick to do actually if you just had the deep colour in the background and then splash that on like that in a sort of angle, coming from somewhere heading to somewhere, and then that could make quite a nice little quick and easy piece to do that could have quite a big impact. And I suppose impact's what you're going for at the end of the day, is some kind of impact, whether it's something that builds slowly over time or whether it just hits you in the face straight away. You are trying to make impact, and if you can do that quickly, then that's great. If it takes you a long time, that's great too. But sometimes quick and easy is a very satisfying thing to achieve, and sometimes long and slow is, but you don't normally get the satisfaction until the end. And here I'm trying to darken the, what we'll call the stalactites of the sort of cave structure. It's almost like it's kind of weird because we can't really be sat in a cave because there's a river there, isn't there, with some reeds. But maybe we can. Maybe there's a pool and then there's some grassland coming out. I mean, I'm the first to admit here that the general concept of it all mixed together doesn't kind of make sense, but I think that's part of the fun of it, and trying to blend it all together when obviously it's just not realistic in any way. I mean, it could almost be an alien world, and maybe that's where we'll end up going with it, but I'm not really going to prescribe it as being anything in particular. Just for me, painting is just about getting paint down and moving it around, and it seems to be recently I'd start off trying to do abstraction, and it keeps becoming something, and that's not something I'm necessarily set out to do, but it's something that's happening, and I'm going to let it happen and go with it. But I would like to do some pieces that are just pure abstract, but reality, perceived reality, seems to creep in at the moment for me. And that's fine. And I've even been doing some portrait sketches in my sketchbook, some quick 10-minute pieces, just quick sketches of faces. And they're terrible and they're awful. But I think to do that fast and just get it down and done is good practice for observing the world around you, and just from moving the hand. And we move the hand a lot less now, I've realised, than I used to when I was at school and things, and you would write pages on pages of essays by hand. Your hand was so strong and dexterous, and now if I try and write a paragraph, I find myself tired and missing letters and getting things wrong and miswriting. And because we spend so much time on computers and phones, it's interesting how that skill seems to have diluted itself a little bit. And obviously it's really important for painting, but it's not initially obvious, I think, when I paint at least, that writing is relating directly to it. But then drawing's kind of the in-between, isn't it? Between the writing and the painting, the mark making, but not in such controlled and tiny way as with the writing. So I've been practicing that, and I've been quite enjoying it, and they're on my TikTok if you want to find that. That's at Deadartstudios. And I'm not going to put them onto my YouTube, because I'm just going to keep that for painting. The folks on TikTok seem to like the sketching, maybe more than the painting, which is interesting. But I think YouTube is going to be painting, and that's what I want to do with it, so that's where we'll keep it. Now, I've got a load of paint on there. I've swished it all around, and I've created something else from what we started with. Now, what do I do next? Because I have no memory now of what happened next. So let's see. I am picking something up, but then I might be mixing something now. Whether I just left it at this point and went cleaning up, I really don't know. Oh no, there's blue. There's blue coming out. Okay, so I remember now, I'm going to do the top and try and deepen and darken it to create a sort of dark feeling around the edges. The vignette, as a photography term. Yeah, get that sort of vignette around it. So there I am. I'm mixing up my ultramarine blue with my thinners. Excuse me. The cold has just about gone, but it's still just hanging on. A bad time to start a YouTube channel, really, when you're constantly ill with upper respiratory infections. But that's what I was handed. And you know, when I started with this YouTube channel, I didn't really consciously start it. Well, it was something I was planning on doing, but I just woke up one morning and did it without any great intention to do so. I find that happens for me quite a lot. I just do things out of the blue, and this is certainly one of them. And then you find yourself, you're in something then, and then you're like, well, you're going to carry this on. And I suppose long term I wanted to do it, so I have to, really. But I just got up one morning and made a YouTube channel, and here we are doing it. Not that many people are watching yet, but hopefully over time we'll get a community. And I quite like the shorts, because that's a way of getting people to quickly see what I'm doing. If they're interested, then they can come and look at the rest of it. And you know, I don't expect a huge amount of people necessarily to be interested, but maybe some people are, and maybe some of the things I've got to say might be of some vague interest to some people, or maybe they're calming or relaxing, or maybe they annoy you, or anything like that. I don't know, but whatever it achieves or does, maybe it's something, rather than not doing it and just saying no. Try to say yes as much as you can. Sometimes say no, but generally try and say yes. I think it's interesting that I think most children learn the word no before they learn the word yes. My daughter definitely learned no before yes, and I think it is important because they need to. You kind of give them everything they need to exist and survive, and then they need to tell you when it's too much, I suppose, or they want something else. And if you're not getting it, yes kind of doesn't work, does it? It's no is the easier one of the two. Maybe that's not true. Maybe it's a true binary situation, a yin and a yang, a 1 and a 0. I don't know, but something tells me that there's a slight favourability towards the no than the yes. A bit like, not really a bit like, but there's a slight imbalance in matter and antimatter. Is that true? I don't know. I can't remember that aspect of my physics so well. Obviously, there's not loads of antimatter banging around in the sky, because it immediately, there's a slight proportional difference, isn't there? And that's why there's loads of matter. So maybe it's like that. Anyway, I think we're reaching the end of the video. We're just got a minute or so left. So I hope you've enjoyed looking at what I'm doing with this painting. It's a bit different to some of my other ones, and I've got an eclectic mix on at the moment, really, and it's getting a bit frustrating in some ways because I'm not sure any of them are exactly what I want to be doing, but I'm going to do them, because if you just stop, then it's too easy to stop every time, isn't it, then? Like if you're running a marathon, but you keep stopping at mile 6, you're never going to run it, are you? So even if your form's not perfect and you're slow, you just need to get through somehow, I suppose. Anyway, I wish you all well, and I'll be back again soon with another video, probably a different painting. But take care, and have a good night. Bye.